Hello adventurers and welcome back to my channel. Today we are in Kingman, Arizona on one of the many stops here on Route 66 that you won't want to miss. We are about to go into the official Route 66 Museum and Visitor Center here in Kingman, and this is one that I'm very excited about because it looks very promising. Let's go. But before we go in, this is actually known as the Powerhouse at Kingman, Arizona. This powerhouse was actually the oldest known reinforced concrete industrial building which generated electricity for the community between 1909 to 1938, and now it is actually renovated for us to go in and learn more about the Mother Road. Now this location is pretty cool because not only is it a museum for Route 66 upstairs, which we're about to go and see, but it's also a visitor center, so you can get all of your information not only about Kingman but the surrounding areas here. So maps and real life people to talk to that can kind of put you in the right direction. That is super handy. And they have a gift shop. Okay, they do have a little ticket booth right here. It is $4 for the museum if you're just coming here, or go with me on this, if you went to the Mojave Museum like I did, it was $4, and we have admission to both, plus one other exhibit, which I probably won't make it out to today. But as we come down this first point of entry, oh my goodness, I'm just gonna have to show you so many things. Now, before there was a Route 66, this area had to come from somewhere, right? So this first area right here talks about how the land was surveyed and how the railroad expanded into this area, and also how there was a definite clash of the cultures going into what now we know as present day Kingman. So it's interesting to kind of come through here and see these different exhibits that talk about each one of those subject matters. And if you want to expand on some of these a little bit more, definitely go over to the Mojave Museum, because these places play together very well. They go hand in hand with all of these different references of historical record. Now, something I find really fascinating though is the fact that in this particular area we have seen a lot of pictures that look like this. Notice there are what look to be horses, donkeys, and camels. But why are there camels? But the camels actually had a very unique purpose. Now, when they were coming to this area initially to kind of scout and figure out what was going on, the resilience of the camels as well as their obedience became something of kind of a fascination, and they started to become used a lot. At one point even thinking that possibly camels were the wave of the future, and as we kind of see more and more of these signs, I think you can see that that was something they were strongly considering. But this was actually the choice method for the guide for Lieutenant Beale. And so there they are right there. So that was one mode of transportation coming through. And then came the railway. After some time passed, the railway started to open up the west to more and more people, and hospitality houses, or Harvey houses, became more and more widely spread throughout this area. Here you can see a Harvey girl on a dining room roof, and also you can see kind of what the Harvey houses and Harvey hotels might have looked like. These were stopovers, mostly for dining, but eventually some of these ended up turning into hospitality suites and hotels. Now, we learned when we were in Winslow actually that the Harvey houses ushered in more and more of the development, because they started noticing that people were interested in coming to the west, not just zipping through to the major cities, but also kind of checking out the various communities along the way. And the first forms of tourism were really created through that railroad expansion that way. And for the first time they were thinking of that as possibly an economic kind of influx into the communities. So there was that. But before we get ahead of ourselves with the trains, let's talk about the first people to come here. Not the first people to come here for trade or even to explore to see if it was inhabitable, but the first actual pioneers to come and settle the land. That's where some of those conflicts with the Native Americans came in. And this is what they might have come in. Now, I know I've joked and said this many times, but this was, at the time, an RV. Yeah. That was a moving vehicle that would carry all your possessions. That was one of the first RVs right there. People would come to the West with these kind of schooners. These schooners were covered wagons that were typically used by overland pioneers. And those pioneers would bring everything that they had in this, hoping to find a place to settle and call their own. Now, there were already people living here, though. There were already entire tribes of people living in these areas. So at best, there was conflict. At worst, there was terrible stuff that happened. Inside the cases here where you can actually find some of the Native American artifacts, you find beautiful bowls, trade beads, things like that. And in some times, people were able to get along. In others, however, really bad things happened. In fact, in this case, you can read a little bit more about Indian attacks and then one specific person, Olive Oatman. Olive was captured by the Tonto Apaches and then traded to the Mojaves, who were living along the Colorado River. Now, again, nothing was just as cut and dry as just what I said. Everything had a lot of different layers to it. And I think that the more and more you come to places like this, you can see those layers kind of unfold. But this video is not about just the conflict or the railroad or the pioneers. This is about Route 66 and what actually brought it to be. I think that there is a time and place to really deep dive into those topics, and we did that a little bit more over at the Mojave Museum, so check out that video. Now, on these maps right here, you can actually see some very interesting notes. For example, the most prosperous town in northern Arizona was Winslow, and as you got over here, you could see some waterways, and then there's this thing called a mud hole, or rough, HC. Yeah, kind of different looking than a modern map. But other terms that were used to describe this particular stretch of road were high clearance only, or flooded, or very bad. In fact, before Route 66 came along and kind of unified the travel through this area, you had a combination of different kinds of roads, most of which were very primitive and most of which were very hard to drive on. In fact, when Route 66 started to be a thought process, the thought was, we can move goods and services from this part of the country to this part of the country in a much more economical way, because we're not having to navigate around all of these treacherous conditions. Like this was literally fording the river, but this was realistic travel at that time. But these maps actually kind of go on and on and on. In fact, the early stages of Route 66, not pretty at all. Not the nice, casual driving, actual paved highway that we see still in existence today. In fact, much different scenario. But yeah, very bad, rough, steep inclines. This one, not as bad, fair, rough in places. And then here, this one was very fair, and it had easy grades on it, so that was definitely a preferable place. And then right here, good road, but bad only in washes. There were still washes in the road. And then the Dust Bowl began. The Dust Bowl ran from 1931 to about 1939. Crops died. Everything was a loss. And people wanted to forge west in hope of opportunities. A lot of people moved out of the Midwest and headed to California with hardly anything to their name. In fact, this is what one of those families might have had with them. Literally everything very similar to that stagecoach, trying to start afresh once more. The biggest difference between the schooner that we saw earlier and this was just that they had a motor, which actually made it somewhat less predictable at times. Route 66 went from being the mother road to being the migrant road. In fact, Route 66 was the main way that people were making their travels through the treacherous conditions, trying to find hope. And it gave a new sense of value to the road. People needed to be able to move forward. And along the way, they needed to have services and goods and things that would assist them. At that time, these were some of the most bleak years in American history. Families were literally uprooted from everything that they had or knew and had to make it to places that they'd never been before. The roadways were harsh. In fact, if you've seen the movie The Grapes of Wrath, it talks about how the importance of 66 actually played in during this time. And here they have a display about it as well, with some of the most famous quotations and one of the actual book covers, in addition to some of the images from that very movie that we think of as just a movie now, but was reality at that time. Listen to the motor, listen to the wheels. Listen with your ears and with your hands on the steering wheel. Listen with the palm of your hand on the gear shift lever. Listen with your feet on the floorboards. Listen to the pounding old jalopy with all of your senses. For a change of tone, a variation of rhythm, may mean a weak ear. That rattle, that tappets, don't hurt a bit. Tappets can rattle till Jesus comes again without no harm. But that thuddin', as the car moves along, can't hear that. Just kind of feel it. Maybe oil isn't getting someplace. Maybe a bearing's starting to go out. Jesus, if it's a bearing, what it will do? Money's going fast. Something else we learn here is that over 200,000 people tried to make the journey, but only about 8% of those who actually migrated all the way to California stayed. A lot of people were turned away at the border. A lot of people were told there were no jobs and there was nothing there for them. Can you imagine being that person and having to tell your whole family that you just took this trip hoping for something only to come up short? Can you imagine having to tell your kids, I don't know what we're going to do, but we can't stay here? And that's just what happened. A lot of times when we think of the beauty of Route 66 and the iconic history, we think of the fun, lights, and the vibrant music, and the beautiful cars, and the classics. But we don't think about this side. And I think that when we tell the story of Route 66, we also need to tell the story of these people, because they were just as much a part of Route 66 as all of the fancy flashing parts. They're the part that really makes it real. Here's the Route 66 that we more feel comfortable talking about. The beautiful side with the big billboards and the attractions, like this one, the Grand Canyon. Now, while the Grand Canyon itself is not on Route 66, you do have several connecting communities that point you in the direction. So in order to fight for those people coming from their direction, people would create these grand scale attractions to draw you in off of the highway and send you off toward the vast unknown. And this is where we more commonly started seeing the bright colors and the neons. Small roadside gas stops became an attraction. Bright colors were used, and people would start advertising for what they had inside, including cold Coca-Colas. Inside these small gas stations, they could fully service vehicles that were in need of a little TLC. In fact, as traffic started to flow through because of Route 66, roads had to be widened, including this one right here in Kingman in the 1950s. What had once been a roadway of necessity was now turning into a roadway of recreation, and large-scale luxury cars like this Studebaker were common sight while going through the Route 66 area. In fact, advertisers started noticing so many people were coming through that they started very clever marketing campaigns like Burma Shave. Now, in fact, as you go along the portions of Route 66 still, you can find some of these Burma shave signs, and they look just like this. It's like a couple of words on a sign that keep you reading to find out what the end conclusion is, and they're very funny. For example, this one, each line is an individual sign. The answer to a maiden's prayer is not a chin of stubby hair. Burma shave. The bearded devil is forced to dwell in the only place where they don't sell. Burma shave. Now, despite these being a very valid point of history now, at one point in time, believe it or not, it wasn't thought to be something that would even exist. And a man created this style of advertising so that he could give a boost to his father's failing shaving cream company. And it became such a big deal that these are some of the most remembered signs along the Route 66 route, and still to this day are iconic. Now, you know how I said that the time that we're looking at with the Route 66 was a fun and vibrant time? Well, it is definitely reflected in the museum here. And you can see kind of as we're walking through all of these storefronts packed full of fun and goodies, bright colors, and also the corresponding walls have these vibrant murals which really echo the feeling of the time. I definitely think that the color choices are amazing, but I'm not just going to tell you about it. Let's go look in some windows. 14 cents a gallon. Oh, that must be nice. Today it was like $3.40. Ooh. Looking inside of a shop, we have a lot of different cans of oil and tools and different kinds of things that might have been used. Very, very neat. And then they even have the attention to detail on that back wall. Do you see that? Let's get closer. Look at that. They have writing on the wall. They have a tic-tac-toe, a tally board, even a little heart back there. That's fun. And it's right next to the phone, which is so appropriate. Let's go to the Chat and Chew, where they have biscuits and gravy, fried chicken steak, homemade pie, and malts. Yummy! Shops like this started popping up all along Route 66 to beckon people off of the highway and into something fun and festive. You can see on this one that they have a little jukebox in the corner, and they also have the little players that you can actually play from the table, which is super fun. Now, the heyday of Route 66 was vibrant and amazing and also somewhat short-lived. In fact, in 1957, President Eisenhower thought there could be a more efficient way to travel across the country because Route 66, despite being very popular, had almost outgrown itself. The demand for getting across the country, with all of the people who were encouraged to do so, had now made it a little tough. Areas were bottlenecking, and some places were having to expand out their own streets just to accommodate. And so Eisenhower thought that there should be a more efficient highway system. And eventually, Route 66, the one road that took people from one side of the country almost to the other, became obsolete and instead replaced by 5 major highways. Now, despite the fact that we haven't taken the entire tour, you and me together, I've been on enough stretches to know that these highways that have bypassed the mother road have in fact, in some places, gone directly over it. In other places, they have left it to ruin, as though it didn't matter. But I think you and I both can tell this road did and still does matter. The last stretch of highway laid in this area to completely bypass 66 was 40. 40 is now the main road that will take you across all of New Mexico and Arizona and into California and across some of the other states as well. But that road single-handedly wiped out many small communities that only today have but a gas station, with an old dream. It's kind of sad to see some of the stops along 66 and to know that once they were thriving and booming and now they're just kind of a blip. But enough of the sad stuff. Let's go look at a little bit more happy. And what better way to do that than with these bunnies? Yeah, we always find bunnies and here is no different. But it kind of makes sense because guess what? We are next to the huge, here it is, jackrabbit. Yes! So I've been to this stop before. You can actually sit on top of a massive jackrabbit. It is super, super cool. And this is one of the images that was borrowed by Disney for one of their theme parks. And I think that that's just kind of fun also. In fact, this entire mural right here labeled The Good Times is pretty iconic. They have some of the old cars, the people, even a sheriff hiding out behind a sign. And then look, there's twin arrows. Stopped there before. Donkeys, well, we've seen those in many places, but they are most famously known for Oatman. And then also, what's that? Shh, it's a no-tell motel. In fact, along the Mother Road during its heyday, in Arizona, it was accounted for approximately 40% of growth came to that area because of the highway. And in New Mexico, 74%. That is huge. So the highway was clearly feeding into the communities and really putting a boost there for the economy. And so it was quite the important thing to have this major road come through your town. And it was a sense of pride. In fact, it's said that the dining rooms of the past that were set up for the Harvey girls and the railway turned into roadside diners, which were more accessible to those driving through. And also, they had more drive-in restaurants. So you could just pull up, get your order, and then get back on the road. It was considered to be an exciting and fun thing because of all of the bold colors and bright neons. And they even had a lot of outdoor theaters at the time. So a lot of different kinds of fun options. I do think it's funny that they also included a UFO, just saying. Some of the quirky little touches in the banners and murals here are fabulous. Just super, super fun. But let me show you a couple of the ones that I think are the best. Now serving dead chicken. I would hope it's not alive. But look who's hiding out here. At the drive-in, they are playing Zombie. He didn't just wink. He said, "Hey guys, I'm winking." There's an armadillo trying to run away with a burger, and this cook is not going to let him go too far. And this mouse is not giving up without a fight. I hope he gets you, Snake. I hope he gets you. So now that we've learned a lot about Route 66, there's actually a museum downstairs that's kind of fascinating also, that kind of ties into the whole we're on the road, it's really cool kind of thing. So let's go there too. As I was on my way to the other museum, there is this awesome theater down here with quite a few seats, and the video is a pretty lengthy one. So if you want to see this, make sure you ask about it when you first come in because you want to catch the whole thing for sure. Oh my gosh, guys. Oh my gosh. Do you remember how at the beginning of the video I said we were in the powerhouse? Well, this is so fitting that the powerhouse houses what we're about to see. Now, the museum itself and Route 66 is about the dream. It's definitely about the dream. And this museum within a museum is definitely about the dream for the future. I'll show you what I mean. Now this small case right here talks about a man named Charlie Gold, and I will kind of paraphrase what a lot of the articles that you're seeing kind of say. He basically was alive from 1908 to 2008, and he was a creative genius who at one time held 41 patents in his name. He believed that the future was electric, and after creating this vision of electric cars, you're going to see what has kind of happened. The room we are in is filled with electric cars. Different styles, different looks, different appearances, different kinds of ways that you can drive them, different kinds of ideas within the technology itself. And these are spectacular. This one right here has 3 wheels, 2 in the front, 1 in the back. It is a 1-passenger vehicle in this wonderful kind of greenish color. It's pretty neat looking. However, I think that the ones beside it are even better. This one, you might notice, has a little monogrammed Willie on it. And it is in fact a royal ride. But that royal ride is actually for country music royalty Willie Nelson. Yeah, this was Willie's golf cart. In fact, Willie had one and Waylon had one. This one is actually a Mercedes-Benz style, but you can see here both very different, very cool, electric. Now, were these going to drive out on the highway? Probably not. However, some of these other ones definitely could. This one was actually created in 1993 by a company called CityCom, and it's a Targa. It weighs 650 pounds and can drive for up to 3 hours at 35 miles per hour. So those are obviously a bit more modern, but let's take it back a little bit. Let's go back in time, because we really like to see some things that might have been earlier on as well to kind of get a point of reference. And this row right here definitely will do that. In fact, these right here are more like electric scooters today, or like the electric wheelchairs that we have. You can see this one actually has its own horn that you can push the button on even, and they were steered using these little column steering mechanisms like that. Now this one right here is called a Custer chair car, and it was produced in about 1916 all the way up to 1933, and it would get to about 18 miles per hour and hold 300 pounds. Now again, these were more likely used for mobility, for people who couldn't get around the same way. The modern day power chair of then. But it was also said that this one in particular started to have advancements in the technology which allowed them to start putting people who had come back from war, who might have been wounded, in a more comfortable style of movement. So that's where the more modern chairs actually spawned from, was something like this one right here. Now, a lot of things started to change after the war because technology had come a long way and things like this started to be developed. This was actually developed probably in the late 40s, and as you can see, it's a bit more complex in design, and it would allow you to have a little bit better travel. It is controlled by a single mechanism right here, but it is still a 3-wheeler. And that turned into something like this as the company continued to evolve. Much more beefy tires. There's 4 of them. This looks more like a traditional golf cart. So we're still not into the daily drivers just yet. In fact, the electric cars were mostly used in hospitality, or again, for the mobility issues that people had. It wasn't until much later that they started thinking, oh, these could be practically used and allow us to travel more efficiently and also without polluting the whole world. So as we kind of move through a few more of these, you see the styles are kind of shifting, and then we get to this guy. This one right here is called the Bombarder. And it was produced between 1996 and 1999. This could actually travel about 30 miles. And as you can see, it looks more like a more modern smart car. Definitely has seat belts, so that's a daily driver kind of thing. And it has regular tires. Even better though is this guy. As you can see, we're advancing more and more. We're getting to be more complex. The doors on this one are a little bit better. You have better mirrors, and you have a few more options in this one, it looks like also. After seeing the ones that we could use in a more practical way, let's just throw it out there to something completely not practical. A race car. Look at this guy. Slick tires, ready for the track, and it is electric. But how did we go from where we started to this guy? Well, there are a few steps in between, and I've kind of been showing you kind of in a kind of crazy timeline of some of those steps, but here's a few more of them. We didn't just go from crawling to walking. There were some steps in between for learning. Like this. This was actually an electric car that was built for the railroad and also for transporting things. So this was used very early on and became a more efficient alternative to using livestock. In the 80s, people dabbled with electric motorcycles, and this was actually one of those. And you can see behind it there are little charging stations, different versions of how far we've come and where we're going toward. And believe it or not, long before Tesla came out, Porsche actually was doing it already. This was an electric Porsche that used 96 watts of charging, and that was also in the 80s. So Tesla came along after? What? A lot of people think that Tesla invented the whole technology on electric cars, but that's not the case. We've seen many different kinds of vehicles in here that were long before that. They just perfected the technology a little bit to make it more efficient. But we're not done yet. There's some more. As you can see from this is not your typical vehicle. In fact, this looks kind of like a postal vehicle that my dad would drive, except for like an amped up version. But did you know that this was actually an electric version? Now, this electric version of the postal vehicle actually brings up a very valid question. Who killed the electric car? Not dead yet. And it says here that automakers were actually starting to go toward electric cars a bit back and then started scrapping them as opposed to moving forward with the technology. And there's many reasons that they have cited for doing this, but as the world changes a bit, considering these as good alternatives is something that we should kind of lean into just a little bit more because, well, we just should. So this kind of raises the question as to why they did it, how many different kinds were scrapped, and then kind of the steps that are being taken now to start improving the technology so we can move forward again. I mean, this Roadster right here, built in 1995, kind of proves that electric can be nice. This one goes up to 60 miles an hour and can go for 60 to 80 miles on average. So while it's not getting us the 200 or 300 miles that we might be getting in a gas-powered vehicle, this is getting closer. And what you're seeing right here is actually a vehicle that has been converted to electric, just kind of showing that you can in fact do this. It is so neat to see this reconstructed body looking absolutely beautiful, and yet it's not running off of all of those gassy cylinders, and in fact is clean fuel because it's using electricity. So that is cool. Now, this entire trip in this room, there has been one giant, massive, huge elephant in the room. Do you see what I see? What we are looking at is called the Buckeye Bullet. The Buckeye Bullet. Now, the Buckeye Bullet is huge. As you can see, it just seems to go on and on and on. It was actually built by students at the Ohio State, and this particular vehicle right here has broken 2 land speed records. And guess what? They did it by not using fuel, but instead using electricity. In fact, it goes on to tell a little bit more about it right here and how they've used lithium-ion batteries, and then also how the land speed record has changed. They can get this thing up to 320 miles per hour, and that is crazy. Of course, they do these land speed tests out at Bonneville at the Salt Flats, and this is what that looks like. If you ever get an opportunity to go out to the Salt Flats just to see them, they're pretty cool. But if you could go during this time, wow, that would be awesome. In fact, I might have to put that on my bucket list. Like, that might be on my list, yes. Now, this last one that I want to show you is something that kind of looks a little familiar. You know that in my van, I personally use solar to power all of my power stations, and I have solar panels that I put out whenever I need to do that. But this takes solar to an entirely different level. This is actually a solar race car. Let me tell you a little bit more about it, but let me show you what it looks like up close first. As you can see, the entire panel here is covered with solar, and then there's a little cockpit over there. This actually placed 11th at the World Solar Challenge in 2011. It weighs approximately 375 pounds. Now, the World Solar Challenge is quite the interesting challenge to dive into. Now, this particular car was designed by Stanford, if it tells you anything. There's a lot of technology going on there. But the Solar Challenge is just a really fascinating deep dive. It would be impossible for me to describe exactly what happens in this single video. It would need its own video by itself. But just know that people from around the world converge with cars like this, and they see who can win. That's the basics of it. It's a really, really neat challenge and very fascinating to see all of the different creations they come up with. In fact, I think there's a couple of documentaries about it, and if I find one of them, I'll link it in the description below. Definitely check that out. Like all good things, this one must come to an end, so it's time for us to exit through the gift shop. Or in this case, through the visitor center. Let's go check out a few of the things that they have and see if there's anything that can point us in the direction of a future adventure. I always love a good book, and they have tons of books here about all the different things we can do in the Southwest, so maybe. Beautiful prints. Oh, I love this. They have different kinds of shaving lotions and soaps. I bet these are locally produced. That is nice. And sure enough, all of these things are made here in Arizona. So here we have some more. Oh, ooh, that could be good. I hope you have enjoyed coming along with me today to the Kingman Museum of Route 66. It has been fabulous, and Dimples and I can't wait to take on more of the Mother Road in the future. If you have enjoyed, remember we are not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. Leave a thumbs up, hit the subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!